Good evening and welcome to the Drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station. I'm your host, Roman. We have a terrific show planned for you today. Don't forget to stay tuned to IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station after the Drive at 5 for Warriors Talk with Rochelle at 6 p.m. She get the love and inspiration going. She spreads it throughout the week and with a smile on her face. And then she comes back on Monday to do it again and again. So that's Rochelle, Warriors Talk, 6 p.m. Tonight, my guest is a well-renowned actor, playwright, executive director, Counterpart Stageworks, Inc., and artistic director for the Fleetwood Jourdain Theater. Please give a Drive at 5 welcome to actor Tim Rhoze. Welcome to the Drive, sir.
Hey, thank you, Roman. How are you, my brother?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Well, I think we're all seeing and hearing the same thing. These days it's minute to minute. As soon as you turn on the radio, as soon as you turn on the TV, we're consumed with the obvious, right? So in the midst of all of that, I'm trying to do well. I'm thankful that my health is good. My daughter's health is good. My life partner's health is good. So I appreciate you asking.
So please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station your background.
Where do you want to begin? Back in Detroit, Michigan, where I was born and raised. So that's my hometown. That's my first home. Evanston, Illinois now has become my second home. So my background, began there as I, traversed through all the different levels of school: elementary, junior high school, college, Wayne State University. Moved to Chicago in my late 20s after pursuing a little bit of an acting career in Detroit, and realizing that I wanted to explore some other things. And so there were options. Obviously, you've got New York City. Obviously, many people consider the mecca of live theater, but I found Chicago to be far more appealing to me. So I came to Chicago and started working with places like the Goodman Theater, Steppenwolf, Victory Gardens, and things like that. And as time went on, I became more interested in maybe a television career. And so I ventured out west to Hollywood, LA, and gave my shot out there and had a good time. Had some years of being able to be on set with a number of good people, but my heart still remained in theater. And so I began to pursue that even more. So I came back to Chicago, went to New York as well, and was just bouncing back and forth between Chicago and New York doing the theater thing, and then became the artistic director of the Fleetwood Jourdain Theater 10 years ago, after my directing career started to make some moves about 15 years ago.
I read your bio. I got a chance to read your bio.
Yeah.
It seems like acting was in your blood ever since you were a child, taking after your father's footsteps. Tell us about that inspirational moment acting is for you when you were going over your lines. Your father used to take you to rehearsals and you used to go over lines with him.
You talking about not even so much the inspiration for acting, right? The moment in my life that you're talking about. My father was a full-time employee of the U.S. Post Office. He worked midnights, but he moonlighted as an actor at the Detroit Repertory Theater. And he was cast in a play called Ceremonies and Dark Old Men by Lonnie Elder III, one of the great playwrights out of the 60s. He wanted me to run lines with him, which was great. But a little bit of the background before that is that at that age, at 8, 9 years old, I wasn't doing very well in school. Actually, the school had me tested. My parents had me tested, and I was tested out as what they would call back then remedial or functionally illiterate is what they actually labeled. And so I was one of the few kids in that small room off to the side when all the other kids were going down the hallway, and they would knock on the window and make fun of you because you did not have the same academic skills and whatever. They could brag about how they were doing so well in school, and I wasn't doing well at all. But I could read words, I just couldn't comprehend. So, but my father asked me to read all the lines in the play of Ceremonies of Dark Old Men, all but his lines. He was playing Mr. Jenkins, and I would play Adele, Mr. Parker, the brothers, and all that kind of stuff. Because I could read the words. I learned how to read fast to sort of, mask the idea that I was not comprehending. I wasn't understanding. And so this particular night, when I began to help him learn his lines, and I'm doing all the other characters, something clicked. And when he went to work, I read the play from beginning to end, and I could comprehend it. I knew exactly what the storyline was, what the plot line was. I knew all about the conflict and the resolution. I can use those terms now. I couldn't back then, but I would begin to understand, because of the way plays were formatted on the page, it grabbed my attention in a way that a textbook could not. And so with that in mind, my father began to just fill me up with plays like by Tennessee Williams and Ibsen and Ron Milner. And oh my gosh, it was like just a flood of plays came my way that I enjoyed reading. To this day, my brother, I'm sure that, the intellectual that you are, you would probably read a chapter in a textbook in about an hour, maybe two, right? Depending on the subject matter. It would still take me 4 hours to get through that material, but a play, I can read 4 or 5 plays a day, because of the way that it's formatted and the way that my mind processes it. But even then was not something that I thought theater was a career for me, but it was a game changer in that I realized that I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't marked anymore. And I began to stand up for myself because I knew that I had the ability to comprehend. It was just how things were. So you have to understand, back then, the way everyone was taught the same way. Blackboard in front of you, sit in your chair, be in that room for an hour, take it in, do the test, pass or fail. Now, learning is a little more specific to the individual in many cases, right? Not often enough, but far more than it was back then. So I was just lumped into a group. Perhaps if I was coming through it today and sort of exhibiting those sort of behaviors in reading skills, comprehension skills, they may have tried to pump drugs into me, tell me that I'm this, that, or the other thing. But truly, it was just something about theater and the language of theater that clicks with me to this very day. And that saved my life. I think emotionally, intellectually, it saved my life. And who knows what other path I would have gone down, because I was a pretty rough kid, I'm not saying I was the baddest cat on the block, but I was in the mix, And so if you put it out there, either you're going to get one or you're going to give one, So I was trying to give as many before I got too many.
So basically you're saying Mr. Tim Rhoze is no punk. That's what you're saying.
Well, I'm not running away from anything, but definitely, I grew up in a neighborhood in Detroit that, you had to hold down your own from time to time, and as you probably know, like sometimes the fight that you got into and the person you got into it with turned out to be your best friend down the road, because one thing was a mutual respect. It's like, oh, you give it as good as you get it. It's like, absolutely, So, but I did my time in juvenile home a lot. It was just a lot of showing out. And then that's when theater, so my father, so when I was 15, 16 years old, and I was really showing out. And literally, I was in juvie home like every other week. Every other week, they would scoop me up from school and they would take me over to the Lincoln Juvenile Center that's still over there off of the Chrysler Expressway. And this one time, because my father would always come down, my father and mother would come down and, because they would arrest me and they'd bring me down there like 5, 6 o'clock at night. My parents would come down there, scoop me up, take me home, give me the talking to. Well, one Friday, they came down and I'm preparing myself to go, grabbing up my books and everything. And my father said, keep them. I said, what? He said, yeah, just keep them. I said, well, wait, that's not part of the program. What you mean keep them? He said, no, just keep them. They didn't come back until Monday. So I spent that weekend just out of my mind. I couldn't believe that, the things I took for granted, your freedom, right? The ability to be able to go like to the bathroom when you want to was stripped away from me. Be able to go to the kitchen and get a drink of water was taken away. So just that weekend started to, give me a different perspective of what I wanted to do with my life other than spend it up there in a locked room. But my father introduced me to the Detroit Repertory Theater, where they had a weekend acting workshop. And I went in there and I was the youngest one there. Everyone else was either in their late teens or early 20s or mid 20s, early 30s. And I began to just vibe on the social scene of theater. I began to vibe on the exercises of theater, the games that we would play, the improvisational games. I began to learn monologues like from Othello, and you know, what's he then that says, I play the villain when this advice is free, I give, and honest, provo to thinking, and indeed the course to wit, from way back then when I was 15, right? And that began to like just energize me in a way and focus me in a different way than running the streets and being arrested every other week. So theater was that turning point in my life, you know.
The other key moments of inspiration for you is the language, which you just discussed, the language of
Right.
theater and behind the scenes, preps from beginning to end. You are not satisfied with just acting. You wanted to know everything about theater. Why was it important for you to know every aspect of theater instead of just one or maybe two things in theater?
It's a very good question. And I think the answer lies in the collaborative spirit. And so in the makeup of theater, like so many other things, depending on where you sit in the hierarchy of that, whatever that organization is, whatever that company is, whatever that is, allows you to sit at the table and have a voice with all the other creators. So as an actor, I found myself being limited because when they would go off to the side and have designer meetings with the set designer, the lighting designer, the costume designer, the actors are not involved, right? If it's a new play, the playwright is there, well, it's the dramaturge and it's the director and it's the playwright that are sitting at the table and they are collaborating. Well, as an actor, you're not. And so I didn't like that being excluded from the conversation. And so I decided to pursue the directing aspect first, because that would definitely put me at the table because the director is involved in all of the elements of theater, the creative side of theater. And so I got involved in that. And then I began to hang out with the lighting designers and the set designers and the costume designers and learn a little bit more about it in terms of how you construct these designs and what's the inspiration for these designs. And so that allowed me to speak the language that they speak as well. That was far more interesting to me than sitting back as an actor, waiting to be told what to do and when to do it.
Wow, that's something. I just want to go back a little bit of what you said. If somebody like listening to intellectual radio right now, and let's say they're on kind of like the knucklehead side, as what we call them, of life, and they're trying to, let's say, find their way, what advice would you give them, especially as an actor and a director? What advice coming from personal experience?
I think you have to find that person or that group of people that understand you or seek to understand you. And so in that group or in that person who has a true interest in you and who will guide you and give you guidance, that's what you want to latch on to, right? But you have to be careful, of course, because there's charlatans out there. There are people who mean you no good, but there's someone out there that knows that maybe going to college is not for you. You know, maybe pursuing a 4-year degree in something you really don't care about is not for you, but maybe you thrive in the culinary arts, right? Or maybe you vibe in mechanical engineering and you can repair cars. Or maybe, and when I say landscaping, I don't mean just the idea of pulling out a lawnmower and going out and cutting grass, but a landscaper who actually goes through, especially in these high-end neighborhoods, and they design landscapes. And so an architectural landscaper, right? And so you just have to find what drives you and what motivates you. And that motivation, I think, is the thing that drives you every day to continue to move forward versus moving backward, right? That knucklehead backward, right? So you continue to make steps, even if there's small steps. And it's always cool to set goals that, yes, you know, you want to do this 5 years from now. You want to have this home 5 years from now. You want to have this nice car a year from now. But what can you do today and look at it and say that you achieved that goal, or at least your efforts in achieving that goal were earnest. So even in the failure, you actually learn. The failure is actually another step towards success.
Now, your accolades as an actor, you played in Grey's Anatomy, Friends, and Chicago Hope. Tell us about working on a drama series and transitioning into a sitcom series like Friends.
Well, you know, being on Friends, right? That's like you're the unicorn when you're black on Friends, right?
You said it. I didn't. I was about to go there. Were you like a bushel in a peck with a white sheet of paper and a dot on it?
It's like, really? I'm on Friends. All right. Whose friend? Not your friend. No, I mean, like doing the set thing, doing the whole sort of like drama series thing. It's like a miniature movie, because they take about 10 days to actually go through a 1 hour series. So, you know, every day is like being on a movie set, right? It's very meticulous. There's a lot of setups, a lot of downtime, right? In sitcom, it is the reverse of that. It's still very meticulous. It's still a very well-oiled machine, but you are going through several days of rehearsal versus in film, where you're not rehearsing for several days. You'll rehearse a half hour before the camera's up and the lights are up, right? So in the sitcom, you get to have several days before you go in front of audience, right? And it's much more of a, we call them the suits, or they're called the suits. They're called the suits. And so you'll have a rehearsal in a sitcom, and you'll do a scene, and on the bleachers, the stands where the audience will eventually be, there's about 7, 8, or 9 executives from the studio. And you begin at one end and you work your way down the line, and each one will have notes for you on your performance, right? So you're walking away with 9 different versions of what you should do, right, in a sitcom. On a movie set, it's the director. You know, the director speaks to you, and that's it. No one else tells you what you should and should not do, right? There may be a writer that's on the film set, but usually that they will communicate with the director, right? So those are sort of the major differences. You know, I didn't have a preference necessarily, but like I said, my preference is theater. But, you know, getting to work with like Natalie Cole on Grey's Anatomy, I mean, there's nothing that can describe what that sort of moment is when you realize that you're gonna be her husband on Grey's Anatomy, right? And it's like, oh wow, Natalie Cole, check that out. And it's like, yeah, now you don't have to kiss her. And this was some funny stuff. They say, okay, so blah 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 blah. You're gonna do this thing, and then you're gonna kiss her while she's on the gurney before she goes into surgery. I'm like, all right, you know. And you know, and I'm checking myself, I'm checking my breath, I'm doing the thing. I'm like, okay, I'm straight, right? And I'm going in for the kiss, and I do this tight-lipped kiss because I'm not trying to be too forward with Natalie Cole, right? So I'm doing this real closed-mouth, tight-lipped kiss on Natalie Cole. She said, "Will you kiss me, man?" And so, but you know, that's the kind of fun that you can have on the set. And when you meet people like that, who are obviously legends, her in the music industry, most definitely, but obviously, you know, the DNA is incredible. You know, her father being Nat King Cole. So if we would sit down and have lunch together, she allowed me to ask her questions about her growing up with her father. And it was just great to sit there for like a half an hour and watch her glow as she talked about how wonderful this man was, you know, and how wonderful her father he was.
I bet you, I mean, I hate to say this, I know it's private conversation, but
right.
maybe there's a play somewhere in there. Am
The
I
meeting,
onto something?
meeting Natalie Cole. I don't know. I don't see that in my future. But if you got something to write, I'll direct it for you.
Did you have any memorable moments on a set or a scene on Grey's Anatomy, Chicago Hope, or even sitcoms on Friends that define your acting ability?
Oh. That it goes back so far. I don't know. I think I will stick with the Grey's Anatomy analogy, and the thing that I was able to do with Natalie Cole on that set, with Patrick Dempsey around, and Grey's Anatomy was the hit. It still is in many ways, but it was at a peak at that time that I did the show, and so there was a lot of expectation. But because there were moments of real pathos, there were moments of real emotional upheaval, that connection came through crystal clear for me, and just interacting with another human being, that being Natalie Cole, who was as involved in the scene as I was. And that made it genuine. So I think when we talk about acting, we talk about things coming from an organic place. I was really able to tap into that with her on there, right? In film and television, for me, and there are many phenomenal film and television actors who are able to jump into that instantaneously. In theater, like I said, you get to have weeks, days, and weeks of rehearsal. And so you begin to find these elements of emotions and know where you're going to land. And you begin to use your training in that way, but you have a period of time to be able to reach and achieve it. The television and film is quick. It's lights, cameras, go, right? And if you're going to be in a state of mind, you have to be there now, and that's the difference anyway.
Some of the plays that stands out to me reading your bio, the Sammy Davis Jr. story, Maya Angelou. The Maya Angelou personally stands out to me because the play uses the what if scenario.
Absolutely.
About writing her last book before she died. Tell us about that, and how did that scenario ties into Maya Angelou play about her poems?
Well, the whole thing was inspired by the fact of her passing. And so it was less than a year after her passing that I wanted to, what you said earlier, it sounds like there's a play in there somewhere, right? And so I'm always, and you said the what if, I'm always vibing on what if. We live in a world in theater of the suspension of disbelief. So what if? And I took what I had already known about Maya Angelou and began to research a little bit more. And there was a lot to unearth. But then the what if became, instead of writing a play about her, an autobiographical play, or biographical play rather, about her beginning, middle, and end, what about the after? And so this play opens with Maya Angelou in God's library, right? And when God appears to her as she believed God to be, especially when she was growing up. God was a Black female. And so in the play, God is this beautiful Black female because Maya associated God with her grandmother, right? Who raised her, and her brother, Guy. They had this relationship where she thoroughly believed as a young child that her grandmother was godlike. And so it was an easy step for me to go to that place of the library because of the books and because of her belief of God that she could relate to. And that was the basis for the play. And the conversations that ensued were all about her coming to terms with the fact that she was not able to finish this last poem before she died. And God is encouraging her to, in heaven, to write this last poem, right? And she does. And in the meantime, and at the end, Maya gets to see all the people at her memorial, giving her these wonderful speeches and things. That's on one side of heaven. On the other side of heaven, God introduces her to all the people who are waiting for her in heaven. Her mother, her brother, her grandmother, the lady who took her out of her silence when she was silent for 7 years and began to speak again when she began to recite poetry. So all these Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were all in heaven with her. So this is how the play progresses. And hopefully at the end of it, what people realize is that your time spent here on earth, if you're a believer and you spend it well, will be rewarded when you go to heaven.
You did due diligence in this play. You had to prepare for this play because you had to identify Maya Angelou mannerism, which would some people think would be kind of difficult. But however, you didn't. You find the loophole there. You went through old interviews to get a sense of that.
Yeah.
What did you discover about Maya Angelou that you did not discover before about her? You notice about her sense of humor.
Right.
Tell us about that.
I think Maya Angelou, in the minds in the memories of everyone, was like a perfect human being. Her regalness gave you a sense of security, gave you no doubt that she knew what she was speaking about, and that she had insight to things that perhaps you and I would not have. What I did discover was her fears, her anxieties, the fact that she, growing up, she would use her intellect, her wordsmith capabilities to carve people up. She could do that. So she wasn't a fighter with her fists, but she could take the words that she had mastered the use of and carve people up. That was one of the things that was unearthed in my sort of research of her. And she talks about that with God because it was repenting. It was the fact that that was a part of her life that she did not like about herself, you know? And that was at an earlier age, but then she began to pursue life differently and began to mentor differently. And she began to understand that her words were the words that were going to inform the person she was talking to. And when you speak and you inform someone, you don't know how that's going to affect them. So her thing was, if you're walking down the street and somebody says hello and you don't speak back or you give them a grimace look, maybe that person just needed that hello to survive the chemotherapy they just went to, or the chemotherapy they were heading off to. Or maybe they just lost a parent or a sibling. You don't know how your words are going to affect someone. So choose them carefully and be exact about what you mean and what you feel.
Yeah, we're just about running out of time. So I have one more question to ask you. You wear multiple hats where you're at right about now at the Fleetwood Theater. How did that come about? That you're this, you're that, you're the other, you're doing the stanky leg. What? How did that come about?
I'm doing the Dougie. Right. It's really, you know, and maybe that's, you know, it's just a picture of who I am. I really like having my hands in it, you know. And I've learned over the years to be, I think, a fair collaborator, which means taking in all the information. But as a director, and especially as a producing artistic director, you have to pick the direction that you're going to go. So it was just really simple to me. I really wanted to be as much a part of the process creatively, but then wearing the hats as a producer administratively, right?
What will be Tim Rhoze defining his legacy will be like in the acting and theater community? Like, say, for example, have you ever thought about your legacy in the acting and theater community?
And I don't mean to, to cut this answer short, but whatever that legacy is, that's for others to determine of what that is, right? What I'm trying to do now, this really is no slight, is that I have a daughter who's 25, who's a beautiful ballerina. We did a play in 2019 called Black Ballerina at the theater, which is going to the Pittsburgh Public Theater this year. But seeing her thrive, and then seeing how the work that we're doing in the theater is actually healing our community in many ways. If I can continue to inspire and see my daughter and others who come across my path, if I can be of inspiration, that's cool with me. This is, the awards or plaques and recognition, those are really wonderful, and you're really, grateful for people recognizing you in that way. I prefer you seeing me on the street and giving me a smile because that thing that I told you helped you to get into Howard University. That's the groovy thing that's what gets me up every day and guides me, until I go back to sleep.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station where they can get a hold of you or in contact with you.
Yeah. If they go to fjtheater.com, right? And we're spelling theater with the R-E at the end. So fjtheater.com. That's the website. You can get a hold. You can drop an email. You can sign up for the monthly newsletter that goes out to let everyone know exactly what we're doing. We have a wonderful Martin Luther King Day panel discussion coming up with 5 young people, 5 young adults under the age of 25, who are going to have an earnest discussion about what today is doing, what civil rights is or is not doing today, what activism is or is not doing today. And they're in complete charge of that content and how they want to talk about it. There's no time limit. So if you go to fjtheater.com, there will be 2 links to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. That's going to be next Monday at 7:00. So I don't think we're treading on your time.
Mr. Rhoze, thank you so much. Don't be a stranger to the Drive at 5.
Well, brother, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. When we come back, we will have more on the Drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station.